Meet with students now. They then staged yet another sit-in. They claim management reneged on its promises. However, council says it wasn't given a fair chance to report back and it will not engage with students in Senate House. It's instructed university executive management to clear and secure that venue. Staff and students there have been requested to leave the building immediately. Wits management, though, says their statement has been emailed to students. Well, student protests over fee hikes are now spilling over from Wits University, where they first erupted last week, to other campuses across the country. UCT and Rhodes University students are demonstrating against these proposed fee increments. Ntuthuko Makhombothi is the president of the South African Students' Congress, and he joins us now on the desk. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you so much for your time on the News Today desk.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you're calling these protests that are currently underway a national crisis. Is that not being alarmist right now? We just heard Minister Bladen Zamande at the media briefing coming out of Pretoria this afternoon saying that there are the requisite mechanisms in place to address the problem. And of course, he's very willing to meet with all relevant stakeholders tomorrow.
Yes, we are saying it's a national crisis because when you increase fees, it means there are a number of students, firstly, who are going to have to drop out because they're not going to afford the exorbitant fees. But secondly, there are a number of students who are supposed to be first years next year who are not going to be able to access these institutions. So this is definitely a crisis. South African higher education has a crisis of funding, and many other young people who are supposed to be in universities right now are outside of the system.
You would also like to see a revamp of the university's curriculum at this stage. Why the concerted push now? And what is it that you would like to see changed about what's being taught at our tertiary institutions currently?
Well, I think the issue of curriculum transformation has been an issue that has been debated for a long time in higher education, and I think there's not been a serious move. I mean, we're talking about epistemology, we're talking about Africanization of our curriculum. If you look at, for example, if you take economics as a course, it's very mainstream liberal economics that is taught. It's not, we want plurality in our institutions. But also we are saying that there are many African scholars who have contributed to knowledge that we could use their text in our studying. I mean, we have people like Frantz Fanon and many other contemporary African scholars who we could be actually using their work as part of our curriculum. But our curriculum is still very skewed towards Western norms and Western traditions.
We have pictures of the protests coming in now. Protests of this nature, Ntuthuko, have often turned ugly, even violent. We see this morning UCT students were throwing stones, hurling stones, Wits students damaging property, a glass door. What measures have you put in place to make sure that your members exercise, of course, their constitutional right to protest, but within the bounds of the law?
I think for the better part of these protests, we have seen very peaceful protests, even at Wits. I think also the conduct of managers of universities must be interrogated here. Why do you lock out students in a space such as the Senate House? I mean, this is a space where students ordinarily should be able to access. When you lock students out of their spaces, you are really creating an environment for this. But we have said in a statement that we have released that as much as we are calling for students to protest, we want to ensure that we don't have violence, so that we spend more time talking about the real issues than actually responding to questions around violence, and then they shadow the real challenges that students are facing, which is student funding.
All right, let's talk about, you're mentioning now this alleged widespread victimization of some students by what you've called mismanagers rather at our universities. How does this kind of victimization manifest or play out on our campuses, and who's targeted?
Well, look, for example, yesterday, the University of Pretoria knew that students would have wanted to start protesting today because they are also increasing fees. And what did they do? They went to the High Court to get an interdict before students even start protesting. Now, these things create that environment where now police must come to campus to stop students, because we can't afford to go to the High Court and contest an interdict. And then students are arrested, students are then charged. After protests that happen on campuses, even the peaceful ones, students are taken through student disciplinary processes. And this is trying to to try to avoid a situation where new student leaders rise within the ranks of these of our structures. And we believe that university vice chancellors must understand that universities are democratic spaces where we also as students must be heard, and they should not use the power that has been given to them to abuse students and to victimize students and to expel, arrest and suspend student leaders. We've heard the former president of Wits was suspended, and many other institutions across the country are facing the same onslaught as student leadership.
Let's bring it a little closer to home in Johannesburg. A university like Wits, often slammed by sections of its own student population as being anti-black and anti-poor. Do they have a point?
No, definitely students have a point. I think one of the things that we've also raised in this summit that we just came from is the question of racist institutional cultures that in our universities that really affirm whiteness. And when we say these are spaces that affirm whiteness, we're talking about firstly how you find this the academia in these institutions being white, the ethos and the environment being really very difficult for any black student, even if it's a black student who does not have a funding problem, but they're confronted with racism in the classroom. They are not given sufficient assistance. Their needs as black students, their culture and so on, is not recognized within the space of the university. So students are quite correct, particularly your historically white universities, the likes of Wits, your University of Stellenbosch, your UCT. Those universities still remain, institutions that affirm whiteness. We saw the statues and they're under-transformed. Then you saw the questions of statues that were raised. Those are all the issues that feed into this, the history, affirming the history and the narrative of the history of whiteness in South Africa. And nothing has been done over the past 21 years to really affirm these spaces as spaces also welcoming for us as black students. And if we are in a democracy, it must be a non-racial space, our universities.
Thank you, Ntuthuko. That was Mr. Ntuthuko Makhombothi. He's the president of the South African Students' Congress, joining us on the News Today desk.